How's Elizabeth?
Hi. Hi, Elizabeth. Okay.
Oh,
What's
you're
it?
on mute.
Oh, hi. Sorry about that. Hello, everyone. How are
Hi.
you?
Okay. Hi.
Pretty good.
Good.
All right. Good. Yeah, that sounds like a great movie that you proposed for
Oh,
the.
yeah, the Jack Bull. Yeah, I think it's. I need to watch it again because the first time I watched it, I got distracted in the first half, but I
Yeah.
really liked it. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, at first I wasn't sure what to make it. It seemed like a standard Hollywood Western or something, but I see the where it relates to. There's this conflict between human-made law and our innate sense of justice and what to do when they clash. I think it's a perfect
Yeah,
example of that.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it should be interesting.
yeah.
Have you got any other films planned, Victor or Mike?
I, Mike didn't you had Solaris or something?
Yeah, we could do Solaris. Um, you want to start penciling in a date?
No, no,
Uh,
there's no rush on it, but I think you did want to do that.
yeah,
Yeah.
I do want to do that. I am.
I don't
Okay.
think I know that film. What's that? Solaris, did you say?
Solaris, the 1972 Soviet Union. It was supposed to be kind of an answer to 2001: The Space Odyssey. They were always trying to keep up in those days.
Oh,
But
sorry,
so
excuse me a sec. My phone's ringing. Apologies.
Hmm.
anyway,
Yeah, I saw the Russian version. Tarkovsky is the director. In fact, he's famous for other films as well. Um, yeah, but it was a long time ago, so I have to.
yeah, I mean, I, when I watch it now, I only watch a few scenes because some of the scenes are, I don't know, it doesn't really do that much for me. But I mean, on the whole, I still think it's a pretty cool
Hmm.
flick, especially, um, well, that there's some good stuff, and there will create some conversation, I think.
Yeah, there's some other films by the same director, Andrei Tarkovsky, that did Solaris that are more. That was one of his early films, I think, that are also possibilities for future. Because they,
I've heard, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and
yeah,
I've seen some of them. Yeah, they're all pretty interesting, really.
yeah, they're meditative and very slow paced, and yeah, we'll see.
Good for a discussion group.
Yeah, okay. See, it's been. We'll wait just one more minute, then we'll get started because we'll let people come in whenever they're ready. Um,
The weather's spectacular in Seattle today.
yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it's gorgeous.
yeah,
Yeah, it's like spring,
yeah,
Yeah, so
even better than spring,
really.
almost.
What's the high temperature there now?
Let me check. It's not particularly warm, but it's just, I mean, it looks really great.
Oh, yeah,
Actually, it's been a very dry winter altogether, but
really.
dry and sunny. Well, it says it's only 44, but I mean, in the sun, it's going to be pretty warm.
Oh, 44 in okay, yeah. Here it's 80.
Well, you can't beat that.
Well, it's 80 in the afternoon, but it actually surprisingly drops to upper 50s. By 7 o'clock, it drops 20 degrees. It's
wow.
it can drop quite a bit because it's much drier here. So you get dry heat, but you get very cool nights, even in the summer. So you get these warm afternoons, but it rarely is hot in the at night. Anyway, I guess we'll get started since there's enough of us here. Um, yeah, first, most of us are regulars. Welcome to Serpent Frog, and you're welcome, and anybody else who wants to who comes in. Um, yeah, let me see. Where is the? Yeah. By the way, I am recording this, but and I may put it up on our YouTube channel for the benefit of anybody who wanted to come but couldn't make it. But if anybody has any problems with that, or you don't want it public or not, just let me know. It's not a thing I'm going to do. If there's anybody who has problems with it, um, it's just for the benefit of those who can't make it. All right, yeah. Anyway, welcome everybody for the new people. The way this usually works is I'll do a presentation, which I will interrupt periodically to get some feedback from people, and toward the end we'll open it up wide open to your reactions, comments, questions, or whatever. Uh, there's, I'm not um, proposing like a, that you have to believe this idea, this theory of immortality or not. I'm discussing the philosophical issues around it, which have been uh, in the works for at least half a century since. I mean, immortality has been discussed for thousands of years in religion going to the distant past, but serious philosophical attention really, at least in modern times, didn't start until the 1970s. And it was largely inspired by an article by the British philosopher Bernard Williams on the which I have a link to in the description. Also, there's an extended write-up if people want to get deeper into this, and I'm going to be summarizing a lot of things, but there's a lot of detail in the extended write-up for anybody who wants to follow up on that. Also, I apologize for my voice. I'm dealing with a cold at the moment, but I'm on my way out of it. Um, yeah, and this is another thing. This isn't about the possibility or the actuality of living forever or indefinitely. It's about the desirability of it if it were an option. So it's not about do I have any beliefs about whether immortality is real or not, or anybody else. That is actually a topic, but it's a metaphysical topic, and not really the topic of today. Today's topic is basically this: if there was a possibility for you to be immortal, or at least live indefinitely, would you take it? That it's a question about whether we would find it desirable. And there, surprisingly, I was well, I'll get into that later. Anyway, I want to first make some distinctions, some definitions, so we know what we're talking about. There is several ideas about what immortality is. One of the most strict sense is that of being forced or even condemned to live or experience things forever. This is like going to hell or heaven forever and ever notion. Um, that's one sense. There's another one that's a little bit more modest, and it's called life extension. This means that if you were offered the option to live as long as you want, but under no compulsion, meaning you could stop living if you've had enough, you could quit anytime you want, but you wouldn't have to die. This is sometimes called life extension. It's a version of immortality where it would be an option, but not you weren't condemned to it. You could change your mind about it later. That's another version. And mostly what I'm going to be talking about today is these two versions: the desirability of the strict immortality, even if it wasn't, you were told you were going to go to heaven, and life extension, which is where you could live as long as you want, but you wouldn't be forced to. And then there's a third one which I won't be discussing here, although it may be a topic in the future all by itself because it's even more recent notion called an afterlife. And this idea goes to, or at least his using this word, goes back to a book by Samuel Scheffler. He's a philosopher at Columbia, I believe. He wrote a book by that title a few years ago. And what he means by afterlife, he doesn't mean, in a way it's kind of a teaser, he doesn't mean the same thing as what I was just referring to with the other one. But I'm going to mention it because it's interesting in and of itself. His vision of what he means by afterlife is the life that would still be here after your life is over with, or actually even including the life that was here before your life. He's talking about the meaningfulness that knowing, for example, he uses thought experiments to kind of flesh this out. Suppose you somehow knew that the earth was going to end, be destroyed 6 months after you die of natural causes. In other words, you would never experience this disaster, this end of the world. But people you know, younger people you know, including children, friends, family, anyone else who would still hear, would experience it. To what extent would your life lose its meaning because just knowing that? In other words, he's basically asking to what extent are we connected to the future lives of people who that isn't us. It's not going to affect us immediately. It'll affect people we know, and it also extends backward in time. To what extent do we actually identify with and have strong connections and feelings with people who've long since died? This is the before life, before your life. So this is about life extension in the sense that why are we concerned? And he assumes we are, to an extent, and this is where it gets problematic, with life before ours started and after ours will end. He gives an example to illustrate this, is that, in fact, he's done surveys on this, that if somehow you knew that a meteorite or an asteroid was going to strike the Earth, in fact, but it was going to happen months after you're dead, so you wouldn't experience the end of the world, but everybody else still around would. How much would this affect you who weren't going to experience it, and why? Exactly why? And how far into the future would this concern extend, and why that far and not further? And same thing works in reverse toward the past lives, or the life that was here before yours. And there's a bunch of interesting questions around that. That's one version of, but that's an interesting topic on its own, but it is going to be, I mention it just to set it aside. Mainly I'm going to be concerned about what we traditionally think of as immortality, like living forever, or some kind of more modest version of life extension where you have the option to live forever if you want. And I think what I'm going to do next is describe an illustration of what sparked this discussion, especially in the 20th century, but in the past 50 years more so, by talking about this play called the Makropoulos Affair. Sometimes it's called a Makropoulos case or Makropoulos secret, depending on the translator. This was a play that was written in the early 1920s by the Czech playwright Karel Čapek, and was a big hit actually in Europe, and it got turned almost immediately into an opera by the Czech composer Leoš Janáček, and it's still today, as a matter of periodically performed around the world. I think last year was a big production in the UK, and it's been performed many times in New York and in not too long ago in San Francisco. It's a kind of a mysterious philosophical play with a lot of drama, especially in the final act, which we'll get into in a moment. By the way, I'm going to summarize the play because I'm not expecting people to have seen it or seen the play or the opera. The play is probably easier you can access it from a link on the description and as well as the extended write-up if you want to read it. I do recommend it, especially the third act, because the first two acts are kind of confusing and a little bit boring, but it all comes together in the third act into a really interesting ending. The play, and it's this play that inspired Bernard Williams in the 1970s to write an article about it, and since then it's been the kernel of a big debate about whether immortality would be desirable or not. And I will get into more to that. So first of all, to illustrate the situation, I'm going to summarize the play, the Makropoulos Affair, or secret, or case as it's sometimes called. Okay, so anyway, the play, I mentioned a little bit about it in the short description, but I'm going to get into more detail because it's more interesting as we go along. The deal is that this woman, her original name was Emilia, Makropoulos. She was originally Greek, and she was born in 1585 or something. Her father was the court physician to Emperor, Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, who, by the way, was a real character, and he really was interested in the sciences and as well as the occult sciences. Like he would have been interested in this had his father. I mean, Alina's father had somehow, this part is fiction, of course, had discovered this elixir of life that if you take it will freeze your age at whatever age you take it for 300 years. And he offers it to the emperor, who very suspicious, thinks this might poison him, and says, no, you try it on somebody else. Try it on your daughter, on Alina, which he does. But you can't really tell if it works unless you hang out for a long time. In the meantime, the emperor and everybody else dies off, and she's still going. And that's where that image, by the way, comes from, that I used at the description of the clock. It comes from the opera. There was a graphic they used to describe it. She's born in 1585, and they actually modernized it to make it happen in contemporary times in the opera. But the play was originally set in 1922. So the action of the play happens not in the opera. The opera's been modernized, but the play, the action is in 1922 or the early 1920s. So so she's been around for 300 plus years, and so the play begins where she's in a lawyer's office because this young man named Bertie Gregor is involved in a legal dispute over a will that supposedly has been missing for a century, and there's verbal testimony the will exists, but they can't find it. And he's about to lose the case because the people he's fighting with can't, they said there's no such thing. He's making this up. And he's in despair because he's about to lose the case. He's talking to his lawyer. And in walks this woman, Emilia, who at the time is named Emilia Marti. By the way, so she goes by various names, but they all have the same initials. Her original name was Elena Makropoulos. Then she became Elsa Muller as a German name. Then she was Elian McGregor, Scottish. Then she was Ekaterina Mishkin, Russian. Eugenie Montez, Spanish. And at the time of the play, she's Czech, and her name is Emilia Marti. She's a very famous opera singer, like a real rock star of her time. Everybody knows who she is. And anyway, she walks into this lawyer's office and asks what's going on. And when she hears everybody's just surprised by why she's there and what's her interest in this case. She's a famous person. Everybody else is like, why are you here? Anyway, when she hears the story, she says, I can help resolve the issue. I know where the will is. And she specifies it's in some drawer or some room of this huge estate, which Gregor is about to inherit if he can prove it. And no one believes her because it's been missing. The will's been missing for a century. And they're completely like, who are you and how do you know this and why are you here? And she insists, go check it out. And they do. And they find the will exactly where she said it would be. And sure enough, it closes the case. It clinches the case for Gregor. He wins. He gets his estate, makes him very wealthy. By the way, Amelia, the same person as Elena and all these, she goes by different names, but it's all the same person. And I'll explain in a moment why she goes through many names. Is extremely wealthy, very famous, a rock star of her time, and once she's helped this guy, she's ready to walk out. She only asks one. Gregor is very grateful to her for having saved the day for him, and he's also developing a certain attraction for her. She's a very attractive woman, and everybody who sees her falls for her. And he starts to come on to her, as well as saying, "Look, I'll give you lots of money because you were so helpful to me." And she doesn't want his money because she's pretty wealthy on her own. So they can't understand her motivation for all this. Why is she getting involved in this case? And first of all, how does she know this information? Well, she's harassed basically, by Gregor and others, and they won't let her go. And finally, she, out of desperation, she's trying to get out. And also she's getting annoyed by Gregor's come on. She's acts very cold and jaded and blasé and dismisses Gregor's overtures as though, as I say in the write-up, as though she's been fending off suitors for centuries, which in fact she has. Uh, but Gregor misinterprets her appearance in helping him, thinking that she likes him. Well, she does sort of, but not in the way he thinks. Anyway, finally, after they won't leave her alone, she answers the question about what her, knowing full well she's not going to believe. She says, the reason I'm here is because speaking to Gregor, I'm your great grandmother, or something like that, probably. She's actually his great 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 dot 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 grandmother. Of course, everybody thinks this is ridiculous, and she knew they wouldn't, and she was ready to leave and just disgusted with them. At one point, she's asked, and some other character comes into the play at a later stage, a guy named Hawk Sendorf. He's a very old, pathetically senile old man who walks in there and starts and recognizes her and says to her that, aren't you Eugenie Montez? Uh, and she says, his name is Max. And she responds to him, I was Max, I was. But then I was only 290 years old back then. This guy was one of her former lovers from 50 years earlier. He's now very old and senile, but he recognizes her as this being looking exactly the same as she did 50 years ago. And these are just, I'm giving snippets of the dialogue from the third act, where her secret starts to be revealed and people's reactions to it. At one point, she's asked about her rather cold and dismissive attitude to everybody else. And her turns out the reason she got involved in Gregor's case is because she felt some concern because he was her descendant, but he wasn't interested in him in any other sense. In fact, at one point she's asked about her children and grandchildren and great 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 grandchildren, and she refers to them as, I simply can't be bothered with my brats. And somebody asked her how many children she had. She says about 20. One loses count, she says. Um, and I'm going to skip through a lot of the back and forth here, but people are starting to, they don't believe her at all at first. Then they start wondering about these cumulative facts, these things she knows, which nobody else could have known, and also her attitude, which she's accused of being this blasé and like tired of life attitude. Somebody says that it compares it to, is she bored? Is she somebody uses the word French word ennui, which means more or less the same. And she says, well, I don't know. Everything is so dull and empty and ordinary. Are you all here? It seems as if you were not, as if you were things or shadows. Here's the thing about boredom and tedium. And this is my commentary on this. No, these aren't moods that afflict those who can remember. These are moods that afflict us, people who can remember vividly what it was like to be engaged and can at least imagine the possibility of future immersion and distraction and engagement. What she, Elena or Amelia or whatever name she goes by now, and she almost alone experiences there's no name for what she has among mortals. Why? Because no human has ever been immortal. She has. For her, there's no one to share this experience, what she feels like, except, there's some, she does make some reference to that there's one or two other people out there that she knows who are in her condition, who've been living forever, for a long time. In a way, she talks about herself as like being condemned to haunt the world as like a perennial voyeur in other people's drama. She doesn't see anybody's business as being, I've seen it all 100 times before, this is getting tedious. Okay, and she says there's no word for it for mortals. Um, uh, one for people like me, one doesn't believe anything, not in anything. Um, she's a very famous opera singer, but she's sometimes accused of and extremely good at what she does. But she's sometimes accused of singing as if she were singing was frozen, and she says because deep down she doesn't see any point in anything in what she does. She's hanging on, and she doesn't really know exactly why, but she's starting to have doubts. Um, it, but everybody else around her, including some other characters who's her fans, say that that's not true. But when you sing, people are moved to something better and higher. Bitek, one of the characters, says to her, and she responds, "People are never better. Nothing can ever change. Nothing matters. Nothing can ever. If there were an explosion now, an earthquake, if the end of the world were here, nothing would matter. Even I do not matter. You are here, and I am far away, away from everything. 300 years. Oh God, if you only knew how easy it is for you to live. Everyone, everyone believes in everything. You fools." And the Bitek responds, "But why? There are higher values, ideals." And she responds, "Yes, but only for you. How should I tell you? Love there may be, but it is only in you. As soon as it is not, then there is no love. Nowhere in the universe. And one cannot love for 300 years. It does not last. Everything is irksome. It is tiresome to be bad, tiresome to be good. Heaven and earth tire one, and then you find out that there truly is none. Nothing exists. Neither sin nor pain nor desire, absolutely nothing. Only that exists which has some feeling. And for you, everything has feeling. Oh God, I was once like you once. I was a girl. I had faith. I was happy. God in heaven." And then her senile old lover says, "But what happened to you?" Well, if you could only understand what Bombita said to me. Bombita is some other character she refers to occasionally who is experiencing what she is experiencing. Apparently, only a handful of people are took this elixir. He was one. "We old ones know altogether too much, but you have more than we, you fools, infinitely more. You have everything. Why, you couldn't wish for anything more. You live, but in us life has stopped, and it cannot go on. God, what loneliness." And there is but all this happens in a sort of mock trial in the third act, where she's questioned, and her at first no one believes her, but eventually they start to wonder. And there's a little backstory here where she just had come out. They confront her because she just had come out of a bedroom from one of her lovers, a guy named an aristocratic lover named Count Pruss, I believe. And there had been the reason that this mock trial happens is because the Count's son, a young man, had committed suicide shortly before, because he too was in love with Amelia, and um, that's why they were questioning her so aggressively. They were trying to figure out what's going on here, where someone died because of you, and they keep pressuring her, and they're all gathered together in one place in the third act and basically cornered her and just trying to get to the bottom of how she knows these things and her story. And there's one very minor character. This is the girlfriend of the young man who committed suicide. Uh, her name is Christina. She doesn't play an important role in the beginning, but she does play an interesting part at the very end. Uh, she's also an aspiring opera singer. She's a fan of Amelia, but she's very young and just getting started. Um, anyway, we'll talk more about her in a moment. Anyway, Amelia is finally breaking down and telling people uh, she's been. The reason why she's had to move, by the way, and changed her name over 300 years is because Has happened before, again and again. People start. She lives with. She has lovers. She has families. She has children. After a certain number of years, she has to leave them, abandon, disappear, and go to some other country, pick up a new language, new name, a new identity, a new language, because people will not believe her when she ask her why she's not getting old. So she's found her strategy has been to disappear periodically, many times over, and that's where she gets all these names and taking on these different identities. Um, that's sort of the backstory to this case, to where we are at now. Anyway, toward the end of the play, finally, people around her start to believe her because she can tell you just about anything you want to know about stuff that happened a century before, or 2 centuries before, and everything is checked out, including obviously the location of this will. Um, and so, at one point, one of them asked her, and what she plans to do now. By the way, her 300 years is almost up, and what she wanted from Gregor was the secret formula for that elixir that would allow her, if she took it, to live another 300 years. 300 years. She's considering it, but she's having doubts about it. And finally, she says, "Oh, that she's asked, is that what you want? You want?" She doesn't want anybody's money or anything except to see the secret formula, which was in the same place where that will was at. And somebody asked her, "Well, is that what you want?" And she says, "Why do you want it, given that how depressed you are? Do you want to do this again for another 300 years?" And she confesses that she's having doubts about it. And she's asked, "Well, why do you have doubts about it?" Because I just told you why. Because I'm depressed and I'm not sure I want to do this again and again and again. Well, then why don't you just say no to the elixir? And here she says, "Because I'm afraid to die." And so she's asked, "So even an immortal isn't spared that?" And she says, finally, "No." So she's caught between the fear of death, which most people have, and the opportunity to avoid it. And it's a real toss up for her. And what happens is, anyway, there's a little almost comic dispute going on among the other parties here. And she's in the room, but she's now sort of bowed out and kind of disgusted by the situation she's in. But anyway, now that they know about the other people in the room, other characters in the play know about the secret elixir and the formula for it, because I found it in the place where they found the will, they start having a fight about what they should do with it. One of the characters, Colonati, who's a lawyer, sees tremendous commercial opportunity selling, say, decades of life, discounted if you bought a century at a time, for example, or you could have a subscription to this elixir if you wanted. A more generous spirit, Vitek wants to open source the formula, seeing in it a great gift to humanity. Let everyone partake of eternal life. Just give it away. It's a wonderful thing. And another person, Proust, the aristocratic lover, would see as a complete waste in perpetuating mediocrity and riffraff. Only the best sort, the most productive, the superior sorts of human beings should have their life extended, not just your average deadbeat. In other words, he thinks it should be kept secretly to a certain high class of person. So they're having this dispute about this. Gregor, by the way, her distant great whatever grandson, is finally, in hearing all this, is finally beginning to understand the depth of Erlena's tragedy. And he suggests maybe we should just not release it at all. And in the meantime, that young woman, Christina, who's the bereaved girlfriend of the young suicide, who had been helping Lena because she had some, she'd had some kind of medical crisis, but she was helping her. got a hold of the actual envelope with the secret formula and sets fire to it. That and that's how the play ends. And she does it, I think, partly because she thinks that all this distress that these older people are having, quarreling over the wisdom of taking or not taking the elixir. She's a young woman, and immortality means little to her. She's caught up in the dreams of an open future. The thought of there not being enough time to realize her dreams does not oppress her as it does them. So that's the essence of the play. I'm gonna, yeah. The next thing I want to talk about, and then, but before I do it, I'm gonna let people react to any of this or ask questions about the play if you didn't have it read it or heard of it. But the next thing I want to talk about is there was an interesting survey done at Ohio State University just a few years ago. It was probably a part of a philosophy course in which people were asked outright about the desirability of living forever. Just, I mean, if it was an option for you. And it's interesting how people reacted to this. So this is very recent. Before I get into that, though, does anybody have any questions about the play or the characters or the story or anything, or reactions to it, or thoughts or whatever? Okay.
Oh, hi, Victor. I was just going to say, when you said about the immortal character having a fear of death, and because I think staying alive and desiring immortality because you've got a fear of death is very different than actually desiring immortality. Because say all 8 of us here, say the only way we could die is by actively saying one morning, right, today's the day I'm going to die, then nobody would probably do it. And by default, we'd end up being immortal if that was such a thing. But that's very different than choosing to live forever. I think there's a real difference there.
Sorry, saying that well, I know that earlier on I mentioned that there's a kind of understanding of morality, the traditional one, that like you get condemned to go to heaven forever or to hell forever, that it's not up to you to decide when you want to stop being immortal. Then there's something called a little bit more modest called life extension, which is where if it were possible, and there are some technological people out there who think it is, or will be someday, to extend life indefinitely. But you would still have the option to say if you've had enough to, after 3 centuries, like Emilia in this play, to say I've had enough. I'm not going to see anything new that I haven't seen 1,000 times before. I'm tired. Uh, what you're suggesting is, but even she is at the same time that she feels this boredom, this extreme boredom that no human has ever experienced before because we don't live anywhere near 300 years. She also, like us, fears death. And she's caught between her genuine human fear of death. At the same time, she doesn't see more of the same frightens her. So I'm not saying what you're saying is, Elizabeth, that
Well, I'm just saying that because everybody and animals as well have a natural instinct to stay alive.
right.
The instinct to stay alive, taken to its logical conclusion, if there was such a thing as being immortal unless you actively chose to die, the implication is that the instinct to stay alive could be conflated with a desire for immortality, but they're not the same thing, is what I'm saying.
Uh-huh. Well, what would be a desire for immortality that wasn't related to staying alive? I mean, I'm trying.
So it would be saying that even if I was brave enough to choose the day I die, I'd be happy to override that. So it's delinking it from the survival instinct, I suppose.
Okay.
I
Well,
don't know how you delink it from that.
well, I'm thinking, suppose that you had another reason to want to stay alive that had nothing to do with fear of death, because you Well, you wanted to perform a service or accomplish a task or a goal for other people. Like that was why you wanted to stick around, not because you were afraid of dying. You had a positive project you were working on that you couldn't finish in your normal allotted time. That maybe was that what you're thinking of? Some
Yeah, no,
overriding.
I think I'm not sure I'm articulating it very well. I think it's that, or I think I might have to think about it a bit more.
Yeah,
It's something like because we're given a natural death or an accident or there's a means to dying, with the exception of suicide or the death penalty or things like that, where death is kind of somehow imposed upon you. And because you don't have a choice, you don't really have to think about it consciously about dying. Mary, you speak because you might be able to articulate something better than I'm muddling around with what I'm trying to say.
Well, no, I like what you have to say. I think it just is. So, as I'm thinking about your first comment that struck me is this. I think that they're two very different things. One is biologically based, and the other would seem to have some type of, choice involved, whatever we can construe as choice and choosing immortality. But the other is driven by biology, and it's not something that's easily shut down, even in human beings, right? You can be on you struggle until the end to die. Your body finally relents. But to the idea of what he's constructing, I have to ask I was going to ask my question before you provoke these thoughts is, why do you think he has constructed this person who devalues experience, and knowing we can all become kind of immune to experience? We get, oh, I've done that enough. I've eaten enough chocolate for the day. I've lost my satisfaction. Well, it's interesting that he constructed it this way. It's almost like, so help me out with that. I'm just throwing that out there. Why do you think he constructed it this way? And what value would it have had to European society at that time? Why was it so popular?
you're asking Mary. You're asking me, or
Anybody, or
okay,
you too.
okay.
Yes, especially you. Yeah.
Oh,
Since you
by he you
looked
mean
at it.
the author of the playwright who?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why did he construct? Well, I think he was trying to genuinely explore the idea of what immortality isn't an option for us, but if it were, how would we react to it? Um, Given that all of our experience of everybody has always been mortal, no one I've ever met has been immortal. And I'm not going to speculate about whether it's impossible or anything like that. That's a whole other issue. Just normal human experience does not involve words. In fact, this is going to come up later when we talk about Wittgenstein's discussion of immortality, because there are concepts like the infinite or eternal or forever or immortality. These words gesture at some meaning or purpose which is not mundane. It's not something, we don't need those words to accomplish day-to-day tasks. Nothing in our lives fits that description. It's eternal, infinite, and these ideas are very abstract. They're far, far away from day-to-day life. So whenever we get into talking about this, we're Wittgenstein would have said he said gassing. We're imagining things. It's not that he's saying there's nothing valuable or important or even extremely important about talking about these things. He's just saying we can't be clear about them because they don't relate to anything mundane, something we can experience every day. We are essentially gesturing in a way like he would have said it, like art or music or poetry. It's trying to express something that's not expressible in everyday prose or language that is useful for accomplishing things like having dinner, paying bills and stuff like that. Uh, those words are they're used in certain abstract areas of human investigation, like mathematics or physics. They talk about infinite numbers, but we don't ever encounter infinite numbers in everyday life. They're very far away from day-to-day life. And immortality is like that. It's not, it's an idea, pure idea, but when we can't relate it to anything concrete in our lives. So we're basically, Wittgenstein would have said we should be quiet about that stuff. Not because it wasn't anything real there, but just because we're verging on nonsense when we talk about it. We don't.
Well, so what I was thinking about was, why did he choose a bored female opera singer
Okay.
to illustrate the significance of the idea that now that you've put this wrapping around? So it's okay. It's just me thinking about, because she doesn't, in what you've just said, she's not creative. She gets bored with things and wants to, anyway, you know the deal. So anyway, I'm done. Thanks.
No. I'm sorry. Didn't address your question. The reason is, and he's not alone in this. When we get to Bernard Williams, he's going to expand on this. Is because he thinks it's natural for mortals like us to have seeing the same thing happen again and again and again, eventually to suffer tedium, to feel this is enough. We are not psychologically or biologically equipped to deal with infinity or ongoingness without an end. Everything in our life conditions us to handle things, to, finite quantities of things, infinite quantities of things we have no experience with. And if even a lot of the same thing over and over again, we start to feel boredom. Is what he said. It's just he just thinks that that's a natural human reaction. Now, in a minute, there are some objections to this. There are some philosophers who disagree with this idea that boredom is an absolute impediment to enjoying immortality, and I'll get to that in a moment. But most people seem to think that it is a serious problem with immortality. If you did have the option to live forever, it turns out most people do think there's a problem you'd have to deal with boredom. There's some think there's an answer to it, though. And we'll get to that in a moment, though. Anyway, well, let's see. I'll go on to the next section, which is about this interesting survey. This is not fiction. This was, I think, happened a few years ago. I'm not sure when the link to the survey, it's online if you want to pursue it. But anyway, the survey asked people, and I don't know exactly how many people they asked, whether it was a significant number, but it's interesting anyway. They asked people, would you like to live forever? Just point blank, and they were probably asking college students, because that happens at a university. That's what they do there with surveys. And interestingly enough, I was a little bit surprised by the response, but maybe that reflects on my attitude. Most people, 46%, said no, just outright no to, if they were given the chance to live forever. Only 9%, considerably much smaller number, said outright yes. And 45%, almost as many as said no, said, well, it depends. This is this suggests that most people, without qualification, would reject the idea outright. A sizable number of people, 45%, would say, well, yeah, maybe it depends on the circumstances. But surprisingly, only 9% rejected it. Said yes outright. They would jump at the chance. I would have thought that there would have been more, that more people would jump at the chance than 9%. That I don't know if anybody. This suggests that people have genuine problems with the idea, or they don't. I don't know. I would have thought more people would be optimistic and say, of course they would jump at the chance, but that wasn't the case. The majority, by a slight amount, said no, without even. I can understand the it depends people. The kind of depends on the situation, and I'll get into the among the it depends people. These are the maybes out there. They were asked, well, what kinds of conditions or considerations were they thinking about when they answered yes or no? What things matter to them about eternal life or living forever? And there was a list of about 7 or 8 different things they mentioned, and I'll focus on the ones that mattered most to people. And they aren't, for the most part, they aren't too surprising. Number one, um, biggest concern is that, well, they would be interested in perhaps living forever if there was no pain involved. So nobody wants to live in eternal pain. So that it's understandable why that would be at the top of the list. Next in line was, and this is a little more problem. Well, next in line was another important consideration was whether or not you would be immortal by yourself, or would you be part of a community, or you wouldn't be alone in immortal. And by the way, this is also factors in the Elena Makropoulos case. She was extremely lonely because no one around her understood what she felt. She couldn't express what she felt to anyone else. Were it not the case that you were alone, perhaps say the majority of people around you were also immortal, would that change things? Apparently it would for some people, because that was another concern, that they wouldn't want to be immortal by themselves, but if other people were also immortal, that would matter to them. And strangely enough, boredom was there, but it wasn't the highest consideration. And then everything else, I'm only going to mention the things that were of most importance. The other minor things are, you could look at the chart if you want to get more detail on this. Another thing that was on the same level as solo versus group immortality, and I suspect has to do with heaven. Some people said heaven. And I think this probably had to do with where it was, you know, the context, the social context where this was taken, probably in the Midwest, the West, maybe majority of people had religious views, and that so the being real. They must have had some conception of heaven, which they probably comes from a Judeo-Christian view. If it's who they have a strong sense of, well, if I go to heaven, I would consider living forever. That seems to be a concern for many people. Boredom wasn't would be third or fourth in line. It wasn't really a high up there, but it wasn't nothing, but it wasn't the highest thing. I'm curious about how people here. I mean, would you jump at the chance? Would you wonder, well, it depends, or would you just flat out say no? Serpent Prague, you said you would say no? Serpent Prague?
Uh, yeah. So I joined for this session because apeirophobia is a personal interest of mine. I consider myself to be apeirophobic. I think that the idea of existing forever is like a desire of the ego and kind of an illusion in the first place. Like, even if your body is in perfect condition forever, the idea that you are the same person for all that time, your identity is constant, is ridiculous, because even in our human lifetimes, we change all the time and have this psychological thing where we just kind of decide that we are always like this. So I think you basically always go insane at some point and aren't you in any sense. You're just a thing that is always there.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks very much, sir. We're going to talk about that some more when we get to Bernard Williams, because he basically would agree with what you're saying. Apeirophobia, by the way, is fear of the eternal, infinite things that are not finite. Everyday things we understand are all finite, but it probably the most famous philosopher made a most famous apeirophobic comment that I'm aware of in history of philosophy is by Blaise Pascal, who famously said, let me see if I can find the exact quote. It's in the write-up somewhere. Yeah, it's a very famous line. Yeah, the eternal silence of these infinite spaces frightens me. Exactly, just thinking about forever, eternal, or infinite things, this is so far away from any kind of mundane human experience that we don't like, just like looking up at the night sky and just in a countryside where you can see all the stars, and just try to take in the infinity. What infinity means is so foreign to anything normal or human that it inspires fear in some people. Like I don't.
Yeah.
Go ahead. What you gonna
Oh,
say?
sorry, I interrupted you. Please finish.
Anyway, that's what apeirophobia is: fear of something, the infinite, eternal, the unending. Um,
So one of the things that has in the conversation is there are many assumptions like and I didn't want to call you serpent frog, but I don't know what is your
If
name?
you need a real name, it's Sean.
Sean, oh, Sean. So these are the preconceptions of immortality that show up in the play. And that's what I was asking. And I think someone else brought it up earlier about the Judeo-Christian framing of it. It's not entirely imaginative in that way. So to answer your question, if I could, so in my comments, it's like the biological organism is constantly changing. It never is the same. And yet at some level, the biological organism is infinite in terms of its cellular and atomic life, if you look at it that way from the perspective we have about the universe. So if someone offered me immortality in which I experienced, even in this identity has changed over many years, I would assume a lot differently about that argument, because I would have an identity that would benefit from human experience. And I would have a greater variety of human experience if I could place myself in different situations, if I could go and be Japanese and pretend or live the life of a person in a different place. If so, in that sense, the assumptions underlying immortality really trouble me because I think it's really based on a philosophical, if not religious view of what it means to be immortality, and also what it means to be human. It's like, yes, I get bored, but I can overcome my boredom easily. It's not stasis. It's anyway. So I'm done. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Actually, there's going to be, I want to talk about the philosopher eventually, several that agree with you about that boredom is not a block to make it to the desirability of immortality. But there are some problems with that, which we'll talk about too in a moment. I just want to mention that survey because it relates to real people and what the general opinion is about that people have about immortality. Obviously, okay, because a lot of people mention heaven, or what conception of an afterlife would be a desirable one? I mean, obviously there are caricatures of afterlife. For example, that what exactly when I was a kid, I was brought up in a Christian Catholic um, family, although they weren't dogmatic about anything, and I was allowed to have my own ideas. But I did actually try to be a good little goody two shoes Christian Catholic at one point, and believe all this stuff. But I would have questions like, what exactly is the attraction of heaven? What would heaven have to be like for me to actually forward to it? I mean, is it about reclining on clouds, eating grapes, and listening to harp music for an eternity? I don't see the attraction there. What is it exactly? Would there be only good things happening and no bad things happening forever and ever? I'm not sure how I would handle that. I couldn't imagine that. Uh, anyway, but people who appeal to what to the desirability of an afterlife or an eternal life, it seems like they need to explain what would be desirable about it to trace its characteristics. What would it have to be like? And this raises another question about, in which I think Mary suggested, is closely related to whether or not immortality would be desirable. You have to ask, like, for whom? What kind of person or character would are we? What are we talking about when we talk about identity of who? We have to ask the question who we are, and this is a separate question in philosophy called the problem of personal identity, and there are various responses. For certain people, materialists or physicalists, we are literally the molecules, the chemical molecules that make up our bodies, and those in turn are made from the elements of the periodic table, and that's all we are. And in fact, there's a famous what's his name, Carl Sagan. Some of you are old enough to remember he was a big science influencer back in the 70s and 80s. There's a link to a little lecture he gave, in which he was very. He's just a popular example, but there are many thinkers who are hardcore materialists who would agree with him, who say that's all we are. We are the stuff that physics studies eventually. There's chemistry, biology, and beneath that, more fundamentally, physics, and that's it. And so there's a sense in which if you identify very much with the physical part of yourself, you are the physical components of your body, then yes, you are immortal, because all the stuff that in your body was here long before you were and will stay here on this planet long after you're gone. You're going to degrade and feed the plants and animals that will themselves come back alive and a million times over. And there's not a single atom in your body that wasn't here at the beginning of the Big Bang, or whatever started the world, the universe, and you're going to be the components of your body are going to be here long after you're gone. So if that's who you think you are your physical material, the things that go into making your body, then you are immortal. You're not going away. Except that answer doesn't provide a lot of consolation for some people, because they don't identify with the chemicals in their digestive system or whatever their brain is made out of. So that actually might be true in a sense, but it doesn't offer much of a consolation for some people. A much more widely accepted view that goes back to at least John Locke in the 18th century is known as the psychological identity, that says that you are the information in your mind. All your memories, your wishes, hopes, dreams, your anticipations, all the contents of your mind, that's who you are. And if that comes to an end, then you are dead. This is the psychological theory of personal identity. It's not your physical body. A problem with that view is this, that in fact there are functionalists and a lot of transhumanists believe this, that if that's who you are the informational content of your mind, then in theory you could be just like the information on a hard drive of a computer, you can move it to another computer and continue to go on. If we could download the contents of your mind, put it in another body, no matter what it's made out of, then yes, you could live forever. If you take that seriously, you are the informational contents of your mind, not your physical body. In theory, then, yes, you could live, or if you take that identity to describe you, then you could. Just like the information on your computer doesn't have to die when your hard drive fails, it could be moved to another machine, and so on indefinitely. There's that some people, and there are some people who take that very seriously, but many people don't. So what else is there? Well, there's the traditional religious views that you are your, quote, soul, which is not a material thing like a chemical or physical thing, and it's not necessarily reducible to informational content like what's in your mind. It's something else, the word that some people use is heterocosmic, otherworldly. It isn't made of stuff, of mind or metal. It's something else. The problem with that is, because you can't say much about it, I encounter stuff, material stuff every day. I understand what a memory, a dream, a hope, a mental content information is, but I don't really understand what a soul is, because it's ineffable, it's non-material, I'm not denying that there is such a thing. I'm only saying that I don't, and most of us don't have interaction with that. And so there's a sense in which if I am a soul and that's what's going to survive forever, I don't know what to say about whether it's desirable or not desirable. Because I've never experienced just being a soul. I've always been an embodied mind in the here and now. And there's even another view called that says about personal identity that says you are what other people think you are. This is the social construction idea of identity. You you are all the things that everybody you interact with think about you. Take it all together. You're a social construction. And so and actually this view is getting more popular these days. There's even a view. It's actually but it's an old idea too, that says you only die when no one remembers you anymore. So if you have children or descendants who still remember who you were and you cross their minds, you're still alive. And and same with ancestors. If they still matter to you, you still think about them, they have some effect on how you live, then they're still in some sense alive because to be who they are is to be in the minds of others around you. So this is a social construction view in fact, Samuel Scheffler, that idea I was talking about, in a way seems to hold a view similar to this, that our life is not bounded by our birth and then our death, our conception or birth on one end and our decomposition on the other, but it can extend further back and further in the future because we matter to we 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 believe or hope to matter to people who will still be here after we're gone, just as we might still be concerned about people who aren't here anymore, but they matter to us that they did exist. This view is out there, but it doesn't lead to immortality though, because there's definite limits to how far back into the past people will identify, and how far into the future people will identify. Uh, for example, I don't think my great 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 grandmother or parent spent 5 minutes of their lives thinking about me in particular. Um, and nor do I think my great, if I had, I don't have any children, but if I did, whether great 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 grand descendants would spend 5 minutes thinking about me. Uh, we do care about obviously people we're related to. We have even maybe several generations in both directions, but there is a limit, and it does get weaker and weaker the further back you go. I mean, we all have distant relatives. I mean, distant ancestors that we may not even know about. Some we may know about, and they may matter to us in some extended way. But the further back you go, the harder and harder it gets to be very seriously concerned about them. As one person as pointed out, maybe we're very selective in who in the past we want to identify with, and maybe in this future as well. For example, there was somebody who made a genealogical study that says everybody who's alive now has some ancestor in the past who was a brutal murderer, but we don't want to remember them, and we don't try to remember them. Obviously, we got to be here because our ancestors killed off a lot of people, and so we're the beneficiaries of these horrific genocides. That's why we're here and not somebody else is here. And the same thing applies to the future. So we're very selective in how far back into the future and into the past we want.
Victor, Mike's had his hand up for a while, but I don't think you can see hand ups.
I'm sorry, I was getting caught up.
Oh,
Yeah, I'll pause right now. Mike, go ahead, Mike.
Are you sure? Mike, go ahead.
Oh, that's just all right. I've been sitting here thinking, well, the first thing is like, I don't think we're not really designed to live forever. Like I think I think we can kind of see immortality in terms of the nature of the universe being kind of timeless. So there's naturally we can understand the idea of living forever. But okay, so like, what if you used a car? Look, suppose a bunch of cars could somehow think, and then they decided, well, what would it be like to fly? I mean, or suppose you took a group of vacuum cleaners. There's just some analogies I was coming up with. A bunch of vacuum cleaners and said, well, what if I could cook food? So, and it's not that much different for us to say, well, what if I could live forever? Because the vacuum cleaner wasn't designed to cook, and the car wasn't designed to fly any more than we were designed to live forever. I mean, it so violates our seemingly, but the way we seem to have been constructed, that so I don't know. I mean, I got to keep thinking about that, but I just think I think it violates our design in a really fundamental way.
Yeah, I agree.
And
No,
the second thing on my mind is that really what we're talking about here is what is the meaning of life? If you just extend it a long way, does it become more meaningful? Suppose you had suppose you only lived suppose you only lived a half an hour or something like that. Maybe that's meaningful. Maybe the baby thought, well, this is great. I'm come alive for a half an hour, or maybe 2 years, or to me, if I live another 10 years, I'll have outlived my dad. So I mean, this question of, I'm not sure that time plays that big. I mean, it's you got to be alive for a certain amount of time, but it seems like the bigger issue is why. I mean, what is the meaning of life? And I think these discussions are kind of a roundabout way to see if it means anything to live forever.
Yeah, yeah. The immortality question does connect up with your meaning. What you consider your meaning of life? They're closely connected. Go ahead, Elizabeth. Is your
Yeah, I was going to say. So, Victor, when you were saying that some people say that you haven't died if people are still talking and thinking about you after you have really physically died. The implication there is that something of value should last or persist temporally. And so there's kind of a linking of something having value with it needing to last. So if I have value as a person, I need to have a legacy to almost justify that, which I think from what Serpent Frog said, it's like an ego thing. But I don't see why does something of value have to last? Why can't something of value just be a short-term thing? Why does it always have to be linked to an extended time just because it's valuable? And I don't think logically they don't link to me. Yeah.
Well, I think it's because there's a degree of egotism in all of us, and we do want to be more significant than just here and now or the people I know. We kind of want to leave a legacy of some sort, whether it's children or some accomplishment or some contribution to something bigger than ourselves. And the fact that we be completely forgotten, like we never existed 5 minutes after we're dead, I think that would bother people, to some extent. And it's egotism, a degree of it. There's such a thing as extreme egotism, like I want to be here forever, or I want people like Trump, who wants a monument built to him on forever and ever, Yeah, there have been people with massive egos who want to, to leave behind to be remembered forever and ever. But
is that true though, Victor? Because I don't mind if I leave a legacy or not. I don't care if everyone forgets about me the minute after I die. Like it doesn't. I don't have an attachment to legacy. I'd like to think that I live a good life and do good things in life. Obviously, I'd like to think my daughter might think about me, but I don't feel attached to legacy at all in terms of people remembering that I did good stuff or who I was.
Well, you just mentioned your daughter. I mean,
that's the exception.
That count. That's what I
suppose it's not. If it's an exception, then it means I am concerned about it, doesn't it?
Yeah. By legacy, I don't mean necessarily, always some accomplishment. It could be just people you know that matter to you, and you would hope you matter to them, to some degree. I mean, but anyway, yeah. Go ahead, Mary. Mary.
So what you're bringing up for me is the question of memory, and what is how. So I have this big book on my shelf that I probably never read, and I can't remember the French philosopher's name, but it's about memory. It's about the phenomenological aspects of memory, and what history chooses to remember, for example, might be different than what I choose to remember my own human experience. And legacies are for, so it's very interesting. Yes, I think there are people who value legacies. And I think Mitt Romney does, as a Mormon, values both his historical and his precedents in the future around his family. So people value that differently. And it has been a real problem for me because in terms of just thinking, what would be my legacy? I mean, that's a problem for me because it takes me in so many different directions. But nevertheless, I think people do. In general, I think the idea of a legacy is accepted and it is used by some, but not all, perhaps. So.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Mary. Yeah, I think what I do next is talk about, and this is probably the heart of the problem, at least from a philosophical point of view with immortality. And this was broached by, again, as I said earlier, but this British philosopher named Bernard Williams, who is well known. He's long since dead himself, but he was provoked by this play that we talked about earlier. And I'm not going to I go into detail in the write up about what he said and what thoughts he brought up. But the core ideas here are this: he uh, he he first acknowledged that there were Elena Makropoulos's tedium. He felt that, okay, here's the situation: either you retain who an element of who you are over infinite period of time. That is your character, what you value, who you are, your memories, everything that you consider you. That endures uh, in for an infinite or an indefinite period of time. In that case, he thinks you would be tortured by boredom. Again, because your who you are is finite, and every experience you had created the person you are. Um, and that means your memories you wouldn't forget things. You would continue on remembering and remembering forever and ever. It's not like you could avoid that, of course, if you periodically forgot things and became a different person gradually. You started to forget stuff that was more than 100 years ago, and so things might not get boring then because you would become a gradually transform into a different person over time. And if that happened, that is one way to deal with the boredom problem. It's because you deal with it by slowly or gradually becoming a different person. So things aren't going to be the same for you. Experiences are going to feel like they're new to you because you don't remember all that you've seen this 1,000 times before. Okay, what's wrong with that? Well, here's the dilemma. On the one hand, if you preserve your character and everything that's important to you, then you will, it seems, eventually be oppressed by your experiences, as Elena Makropoulos was in here. She was ready. She was caught between a rock and a hard place, between her genuine fear of death and her just absolute tedium, depressed. She's seen it all a dozen times over. She's not impressed by anything anymore. She's starting to feel like why am I doing this? Okay, but that's because she remembers. But if she could forget periodically, but the problem with that is you run into another problem in philosophy known as the non-identity problem. And it goes back to, there's a non-human version of this going back to Aristotle called, basically the idea is, how much can a thing change before it stops being that thing anymore? And it goes in history of philosophy. It goes back to the ship of Theseus problem, which I'll mention briefly. It was the ship that sailed off from a port that had a spare part for every part of the ship, and it was away at sea for 2 years. But during that time, it replaced every single part of the ship, and then it comes back into the port. And the question was sort of an academic question: is it the same ship that took off? Nothing physical about it is the same, yet it does seem that there was a continuity. Bits and pieces got replaced, little at a time, and finally, when you're asking us the second time, is it the same ship? Physically, it's not, but people might want to say it is the same ship. Its name didn't change, its function didn't change suddenly. And this is an academic question when you're talking about objects. But what about people or persons? What if people change over time, gradually, bit by bit? In fact, that does happen with us. Biologists will tell you that there's not a single cell in your body that was there 10 years ago. Not even a brain cell. The brain cells are the ones that tend to stick around longest, but there's nothing physically in you now that was there when you were born, or even earlier than 10 years earlier. Every single cell.
What about teeth, though?
What?
Teeth. Well, teeth aren't teeth. You're not counting the skeleton, I guess.
No, I believe every single cell of your skeleton is made of cells, and they do get replaced. Some last
Well,
longer
I've
than
got the
others.
same teeth, though.
What?
I mean, my teeth are the same.
I believe no. I mean they gradually wear down and they get replaced. The individual cells do get replaced. That's my understanding of the biology of it. The only part of the body that lasts longest is our brain cells, and the neurons. But even they last maybe something like 10 years, and before they're finally not a single molecule in them that is in there now was there 10 years ago. And some parts of your body, like your digestive system, literally change every day. You're leaking cells every day, and new ones are being created. So there's nothing physical about you that is still there that is the same thing that was there 10 years ago. So, but you still think of yourself as being, you weren't non-existent 10 years ago. So that means that we don't equate ourselves just literally physical with our physical bodies. We probably, and this is why the psychological theory is still popular among most philosophers, that you identify with the part of you, your more mental side, your memories, your hopes and dreams and wishes and fears and all the stuff that's ever passed through your mind that matters to you. That's the part of you that you say, yeah, that's still more or less the same. It's changed, of course, but there's continuity there that you can identify with. Anyway, the Williams' argument was that is that either one of two things: either you change in order to continue to experience the world freshly, and you don't suffer from boredom, and you can do this indefinitely, but in the process, you are no longer the person you were before. So yeah, something is immortal, but it isn't you. It's whatever replaced you, and whatever replaces it, and on and on and on. So that's one way to avoid the boredom issue. The other one is to accept the boredom and then say, no, I am, in the case of the play, she didn't forget her past. She had memories of the past 300 years, and that was what was oppressing her. That's the price she pays for being immortal. So either you get oppressed by tedium and if you preserve a character, or you periodically gradually change so that you experience these things anew. But then the question is, you're no longer the same person anymore. So that's the dilemma. So either you're immortal, but not you aren't immortal, but something that's causally related to you in the future is still there, but there isn't much connection. I mean, it's like, are you the same thing as the food that you ate? Literally, when we die, we're still going to be part of the earth. We're going to be feeding, you know, the biosphere in some form or other. So anyway, the crux of his argument is this: that either if it were possible to maintain the character, the person you identify with over time for an extended, perhaps infinite amount of time, you would suffer what Elena Makropoulos suffered, a certain tedium that would cause you to say, I don't want this anymore. Or you are able to conquer the boredom by being a different person, and gradually that would allow you to, in some sense, continue on. But the question is, are you that person? Are you, or is it you surviving, or something else? And that's the dilemma he places. He's famous for articulating that either way, it seems like we either wish to die of boredom, or we become something else and can handle the eternity. And another, go ahead, Wendell. Um, are you there? Are you there, Wendell? You have, I think you have your hand up. Okay. Well, if you come back, Wendell. By the way, if anybody wants to say something, I'm okay. The group here is small enough that you can just interrupt. You don't have to raise your hand. I mean, if you want.
Mums has got his hand up, so
Okay.
he could.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Munzer.
Yeah, hold on. Just a second. I will put one on. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think I'm in the first time in this group, pretty interesting group. And thank you very much, Victor, for hosting this. So mentioning that our body cell changes every few years, which is true, not entirely true. Depending on how many years, in 10 years, probably 95% or 96% body cells changes. But it's still a small percentage remain the same even after 10 years. But that's not impressive at all in terms of who I am or I was, because body cell change, we're talking about the material change, okay? But the information is more or less the same. And that's what's count. My genetic code is the same, it doesn't change. I don't become, the genetic code change, I will become taller, my skin color will change. Those things does not change. So material change, recycling, so what? It's not impressive to me. Yeah, that's okay. That's no big deal. So again, can you hear me? All of you, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we
Okay.
can hear you.
All right. So that's what I was thinking. The second one, earlier you were talking about the meaning of life. So as far as I understand, came to the rational reason and logic-based conclusion is that there is no meaning of life. We have to make meaning for us because biologically we are hard-coded. Like in a computer software, I don't know whether you have a computer hardware background or not. How many of you do you have? There's a software and there is a BIOS, their basic input-output system. Then you have a hardware, which is the hardwire on the printed circuit board. You cannot change that. Software you can change. What we learn, people can brainwash me, I can brainwash other, or teach somebody, people idea can change. Those are the software. But there are certain things hardwired too in our brain, not only in genetic code, but even in the brain. System 1, limbic system, basal ganglia, hardwire. And that's why it's hardwired survival. We got to live. There's no ifs, there's no but. You got to live. It is not my option and your option. Sometimes that area do get malfunction. In some cases, very rare cases, that's when people commit suicide, when pain and suffering gets so huge. But overwhelming majority of the cases, it's a totally hardwired. Now, people have to come up with an excuse, which is the meaning in life. They have to make it up. Self-delusion, whatever it is. September 11 terrorist attacker, they came up with the meaning of life, and they killed thousands of people. And they thought they will go to heaven, they will get 72 virgin, and they kill themselves and kill other people. That was his meaning of life. He had euphoria, he had a joy. Of course, we will not agree with him on the basis of reason, logic, and science, on the basis of utilitarianism, that our goal should be common ground is that reduce the pain and suffering from the world and increase human well-being. If we agree on that, sign a contract around the table. On that basis, when we drive, on that basis, I will say September 11th tracker, what it did is wrong, regardless how they felt. So we have to develop our meaning way to come up with an excuse and then live by that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Munzer. Wendell, are you there again? You had your hand up. Can you hear us? Okay. Well, okay. Uh, yeah, Wendell, if you can hear us, and or for that matter, anybody else, uh, when I'm talking, you can go ahead and just speak up. I don't mind being interrupted, in case I don't notice your hand or something, and or somebody can also point it out if I'm not noticing your hands. Okay, if
Oh
not,
yeah, Kendall put in the chat. He's got audio issues,
okay,
so he can't speak at the moment.
okay. Um,
Mm.
let's see, what is there? Where is it?
And so of all the things we've heard, Victor, who are the proponents of immortality? So who's arguing that it's a desirable thing? Because so far it hasn't really had much
Okay,
support.
good question, and that's what I was going to address next.
Ah,
Okay, so far I've been given Williams and many people. I think the majority of philosophers who thought about this a lot and written about it are on the negative side about immortality. They don't think that it's because of this very problem that Williams pointed out. That yes, you can, in theory, if you either going to humans, that is, unless we're talking about a different kind of being, and we'll get to that in a moment. But normal humans are going to suffer from tedium at some point, um, and that's going to make immortality undesirable. Or they transform themselves into beings who don't suffer tedium, but that requires forgetting. That requires almost becoming someone else. In which case, something might be immortal, but it won't be you. That's where we are right now. Okay, so but there are some objections to this, and one of them in the description, I think there's John Martin Fisher's one, and there's a couple of others that I discuss in the extended write-up, argue that that's not necessarily what I've been saying is not necessarily the case. Um, one, for example, the tedium thing, boredom. Um, they okay, it's basically a purely logical argument, and if it has that criticism is that maybe it's too logical and not human enough. The idea is this, that they imagine that if you can enjoy one particular moment of your life and say, this is a wonderful moment, if I could have this moment last forever, or have other moments like this one that are as enjoyable as this one after another, indefinitely, why wouldn't I want to have it forever, for an eternity? Um, okay. Uh, um, in other words, there's no logical reason why there's something like a logical contradiction in having this wonderful moment. Just either a single moment go on forever, or an infinite supply of them forever. Sorry. Um, so what's
but isn't the point of that though, Victor, that an infinite supply of say the same amazing moment, like looking at a sunset, would make it non-amazing?
yeah,
Because yeah.
yeah. Well, these philosophers think that it's possible. There's something logically incoherent about having an infinite supply of positive moments, but where but okay, so they have a solution to the boredom problem. Just don't have any unpleasant moments and just have nonstop good ones. Okay, but it doesn't deal with the non-identity problem because um, what would it be like to be a person with constant pleasurable moments? You know, like an eternal orgasm or something, forever and ever and ever. Uh, that's not human. That's not like anybody we know. And how could you relate to someone like that? Um, that's the problem. There is the non-identity problem. Whatever it is that could be content with eternal positive moments wouldn't be recognizable as human, whatever it is. It might be some. It might exist. It might be some permanently um, ecstatic entity out there, but it's not recognizable as human. Is the counterclaim. Um, Now it's true that there's some people have more tolerance for lots of pleasurable experiences, or can handle a lot more before they get bored. That's certainly true. There's a lot of variation in human ability to deal with these, but the idea, but forever is a long time. It's literally the endless, and we just have nothing about human experience approaches forever or endlessness. That's the counterclaim. That yes, maybe you could envision some hypothetical kind of being, maybe an AI or something that was programmed to just absolutely enjoy its whatever it's doing now and just have more of that on and on and on forever. But whatever it is, it wouldn't seem to
So
be recognizably human. Um, does somebody want to say something? Or?
yeah, I was saying, some folks have a short memory. They forget their life whole thing. There are extreme cases. After shaking hand, they forget they shook hand, and they are in the mental institution. They forget past experience. So that's a very interesting way to think that if somebody keeps forgetting his past experience, then the new experience will be new, even though he had it many, many times. So he can enjoy the repeat experience as it is new experience.
Yeah, that's exactly the one proposed solution to the boredom problem. But if you do that, then are you for constantly forgetting your past means you're no longer the same person.
Yeah,
But,
you can say that. Yeah, you can
and
say
that's
that.
the
And
problem. So there would be immortality of a sort, but not for you, for the person you would become later, and then for the person who comes after that, and on and on and on. But there wouldn't be a continuity there
yeah,
because
but
of
even in a regular case like me and you, we have changed over 20, 30, 40 years. We are not exactly the same person. Our ideas, even ideas have changed.
mhm.
So we are not exactly the same anyway.
That's true, but we evolved to be able to handle some change, and it was a
Yeah,
finite
yeah.
finite amount of that we can handle. But we didn't evolve, and nothing alive has ever evolved to be handle infinite change. That's the problem. Everything alive is evolved in a finite world. Um,
Yeah. And another interesting thing is that even though people say, "Oh, I don't want to live forever," and I know some people do commit suicide too, but if you take it statistically, when they are in a deathbed, overwhelming majority of the people would like to live. Some of them won't, yeah, but most of them they do. They do want to live,
that's correct.
even if they're very old.
Yes, exactly. And that's actually the dilemma that Elena Makropoulos in the play experienced. She she halfway wanted to take this elixir again because she was afraid to die. But having lived 300 years, she was also cognizant of how what a hell her life is now. She was caught between a rock and a hard place. In the end, she the decision is taken out of her hands by this young woman who destroys the elixir, and she's sort of halfway okay with that because she couldn't make decide herself. She was allowed other people to decide for her because she could no longer make the decision. She was afraid to die just like anybody else. She wants to live, but she knows what it's like to live a long, not even forever, just 300 years was enough to make her life, you know, barely worth living. Um, anyway,
I mean, it feels like she got scammed at both ends because, to my recollection, she didn't have agency either in taking the formula at the beginning. That was her father experimenting on her. So I wonder if that's addressed in the play at all, that she's basically a character of zero agency that has had a very long life ruined by other people's decisions.
mhm. Well, I don't think when she was a young woman, when she took the elixir for the first time, she didn't have any foreknowledge of what was going to happen. And she might
Right.
have even have said yes, why not? She doesn't know what's in store for her then, so she didn't feel victimized then, and even 300 years later, she's still not sure whether she was. Did she enjoy her 300 years? She certainly enjoyed some of it at the beginning, like all of us, but toward the end, she was beginning to have her doubts, and so no, I don't think she felt victimized initially because most people wouldn't. Someone
Did you say
guaranteed
300 years? Did you say 300 years?
330 something years. Yeah, that's her.
Who?
Um, maybe you missed it. Earlier, I was talking about the play, the Makropoulos case, which I discussed in the write-up. This is an actual play written in the 1920, early
Oh,
1920.
play. I thought in real world somebody lived 300. I said nobody
No,
lived 300
no,
years.
but the play does
Oh, okay.
illustrate the problem,
Okay.
and
Oh, I see. I
it
see. Okay.
dramatizes the problem in terms of,
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
and
Yeah,
it
that's what I was saying. This is hardware. In our hardware is program in the brain that we have to live. That's the main, the bottommost layer we have to live. Sometimes pain is overwhelming, then it can override that thing. You probably have heard the name of Daniel Kahneman.
hmm
Are you familiar with his name, Daniel
yeah,
Kahneman?
yes,
Yeah, he's my favorite because I learned a lot from his books and his idea, brain system one and system two, how it works. I won't go into detail, but last year he committed assisted suicide. Did you know that?
no,
He was in France. In France, he committed assisted suicide. And he's American, Jewish American, and his all family members. He was being very burdensome on his family member because of his old age and everything. So he decided to commit suicide, and he was on a wheelchair. His relative and family member pushed him took him to museum and the zoo, and he asked for it. And they knew all of the group that next day he will die. He will commit suicide. I'm getting goosebumps. I'm feeling it in my skin. That what kind of feeling is that? Your loved one, relative, and everything pushing you in a wheelchair, and next day you're going to die. And he requested he want to go historical museum and zoo and meet everybody. And next day he committed suicide. Oh my God!
That's legal. That's legal in Washington State.
it is.
Yeah, in France, he was in France. He committed suicide. You can Google for it.
Yeah.
I learned a lot from him. He's one of my hero in a sense because he discovered things. He Nobel laureate. He got a Nobel laureate too. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. There's one final little thing I want to do, and then we can open up to whatever anybody wants to say. I'm going to discuss a situation that's discussed by Bernard Williams in his paper. He mentions it briefly, but it's a kind of a semi-amusing story, but comes from Greek mythology. But it does involve transformation, and it raises questions about continuity over radical transformation and whether continuity survives or identity survives such a radical transformation. And some of you may be familiar with this. It's an old, from Greek mythology. There's this character named Tiresias that, and it's, okay, Tiresias was when he was a young man, he did something which angered, I'm not going to get into the whole story, just the parts that are relevant here, that angered one of the gods, the Greek gods. And he, as punishment, quote, punishment, and I put punishment in quotation marks, he was turned into a woman, okay? A biological woman, not someone, this was an original trans story, but not like, gender identity. He was 100% woman before he was 100% male. In fact, and this was supposed, I guess, being turned into a woman was considered punishment, at least by this particular god, and because of some transgression he did. And so he was condemned to be a woman and experience life as a woman for like 10 years. He mothered 2 daughters, and he wasn't like pretending to be female. He was fully made female. Then, 10 years later, another god took mercy on him and forgave him or forgave her. I'm going to get my pronouns off because he was a her initially, and then he was a she. And this second god turned him back into a man. I guess he thought it was, again, being male was considered something positive or something. Anyway, so here he is. He's the unique person in history who's had the full experience of being male at one point of their life and then being fully female in the other, and then back to male. Okay? And then the story goes, Zeus and his wife Hera later on were having a fight, a dispute over whether men or women enjoyed sex more. Okay? Zeus thought women did, and Hera thought men did. So each thought the other sex enjoyed it more. So they decided, well, let's solve this issue. Let's go ask Tiresias. He's been there and done that on both sides. So they go and ask him. At this point, Tiresias was really fed up with being sexually harassed by gods. He was ready to give them whatever answer they wanted to hear just to leave him alone, or her alone. At that point, he was a he again. And also, but he was afraid no matter what answer he would give, he would defend one or the other, and he might be, face consequences. So the situation is meant to be a little humorous, but basically he could either toss a coin, because the consequences will be the same for him. He's going to anger somebody no matter what he says. Or he could answer like Zeus did, as being a male at the time he's asked, he's going to say a woman. If he'd been a woman, he would have said a man. And he ends up saying a woman because he is male at the time he's asked. And of course that angers Hera, and it puffs up Zeus, and they go on with their dispute. But the point here is, okay, let me read this. This is important. What is Tiresias' plight? The interpretation of it here is that he was a phenomenon, not a person, meaning a being that gets transformed from male to female, not partially, not how they feel, but really female and back again, is nothing we recognize as a person. They're a phenomenon. Having supposedly experienced both sides, there was no continuity between these experiences. That is, when he was a woman, he felt and experienced the world as a woman. When he was male, he was experiencing as a man. So there was nobody present, no sexless substrate persisting across the two sets of experiences. When he was a man, he was a man. When he was a woman, he was a woman. At no point was there an objective identity persisting through these experiences. Tiresias' answer, to sharpen the humor of his predicament, amounted to either a coin toss or was conditioned by whichever sex he or she happened to be at the time when he was asked. The whole tale loses its charm if you don't assume this, because he was basically, or she was basically, completely, he or she wasn't really capable of comparing them, because when he was one, he was not the other. It wasn't like a person changing their clothes from male to female and then saying, well, I like how women's clothes feels on me better than how men's clothes feels on me. He was female 100%. So the inability to make this comparison is the kind of radical transformation that would occur that creates a non-identity problem. It's like somebody else mentioned that when you were mortal, you could only experience things as mortal, and if you were somehow to become immortal, then you would completely see and experience the world in a completely different way that would relate you to mortals. And that's actually what happens to Helena Makropoulos. She is extremely alone because she is nobody she can relate to anymore. All these mortals that go around believing things that as though it was all fresh and wonderful to them, but it's not for her, and she can't get any sense of where people can really feel the world the way she feels it, and she's alone. Anyway, this Tiresias story is actually from Greek mythology, and he mentions it in his essay. And Sengo, do you have any thoughts or reactions to this?
Hello, everyone.
What?
Hello.
Oh, hi, Wendell. Did you want to
You
say
can
something?
hear me.
What?
You can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you. If I could just get a few words in as far as the immortality and my perspective. if I could remain mobile, if you will, uh, I have that the dopamine effect thing going on, where once you learn new scientific knowledge, that's your high, so to speak. So I think I might fare well once I can still be a non, how should I, not a burden to any other person. So I would be seeking out, scientific knowledge, getting my high, and then I go to sleep, do shower, eat whatever it is. Um, but if you're going to wither, the you don't have that turnover of the eternal turnover of the cells, then you're like, hey, okay, cool. So that's that. But it wouldn't be like the perspective of the author, where the character was like, I'm bored, but because you'll always be learning new stuff, but you won't be ODing, so to speak, and be like, and you'll learn at a certain point that we're all valid, viable, wonderful individuals. Nobody's better or worse than anyone, so you won't be looking down on these pitiful mortals, so to speak, because you would have learned that, hey, this is my lot in life, whether I've chosen it or it was bestowed upon me. And you'll just be getting your high and be like, oh, okay, cool. That person is, gonna expire soon enough. You know, yeah. That's just my 2 cents. And is it Tiresias? I would have answered neither. As to if who enjoys sex more, I would have said neither.
But
Yeah,
on
that's
on the basis of what though? Why would you say that? I mean, why would it be neither?
as far as the out, because I remember the two young humans, they had a thing and they decided to ask me who was walking by on the street, and they were like, "Mister, is it raining or is it pouring?" And I said, "It's drizzling." And that look on that expression on their face,
Hmm.
and
Well,
I kept walking.
well, the reason he was asked, or at the time he was asked, he was a he. If they'd asked earlier, it would have been a she. But he was asked by these two gods who wanted to know because they wanted to consult with an expert, so to speak, somebody who's been there,
Mhm.
done that, and he was the only person, or she at the time he was a he, who could possibly answer that question, and
He
that's why
knew
he
that
was
there would be
asked.
consequences,
What?
so he knew that there would be consequences.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well,
like, so for
that's
me, I
that's
would go safe and say neither.
yeah, that's the joke. Partly the joke is that, in a way, he, Tiresias at the time, was put in a place where it didn't matter what he said. If he was trying to avoid negative consequences, he knows what had happened in the past when he offended gods. He got so-called punished. Whether it was really a punishment or not depends. But he was just tired of being, you know, played with by these gods, and he didn't. Uh, so yeah, it was a kind of a joke answer he gave, but you could interpret it two ways. One is that it was a coin toss. He, he he at the time says it doesn't matter what I answer, I'm going to be in the same boat. Or he was answering as a real male, as in fact Zeus would have answered that it's women who enjoy it more, and that's how he did answer. But either way, it's supposed to be, you know, kind of a no-win situation for him at the time. Um, anyway, but it, yeah. Mary, go ahead. Mary, you have your mic is off, I believe. I think.
So here's a possible conundrum. At any one moment when you're situated in either or, you cannot experience the orness or the eitherness. So as a man, he could not re-experience what it was like to be a woman because he was situated as a man. That's phenomenological. That's the identity crisis right there. So he was probably right to say, just leave me alone for a while. I'm back in myself again. I don't know. Um, the um, the thing that's interesting is the other thing is whether his transition is phenomenal or an epiphenomena, right? So let's say if you start out with something, say the soul is a phenomenon, right? And it is neither it's not gendered or sex, right? Then being female or male is an epiphenomenon. It's a result, some type of relationship to the soul that's an after effect. So it's like philosophically, that's what comes to mind. So there you have it
Mm-hmm.
for me.
Mm-hmm.
If I might add, like I said, with me thinking logically and not having the ability to get these gods because, you know, they could affect you like that, I'm like, let me put a spoke in their wheel and yeah, whatever, man, because the argument might be, hey, who enjoys, you know, coitus more, frogs or humans? And then I'll be turning to a frog or, you know what I mean? So yeah, just anything to foil these gods.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Um, let's see if there's anything. Does anybody else have any comments on this so far? Um,
Well, we haven't talked much about the transhumanists, have we? But not that
yeah.
I necessarily want to, but it
No.
seems like they're the
Well.
main proponents of the live forever, and it's connected to AI too, which I've never really bought into the connection that much. I mean, you can have AI and just live a few years. You don't
Mhm.
have to make it forever.
Or wasn't there someone? What's his name? I can't remember his name. He was a futurist. Ray
Kurt
Kurzweil.
Weill,
Yeah. Didn't he believe that you could download his self or mental contents into to some computer and thereby continue on and on and on forever? That's an example of a pure functionalist
sounds like
who believes that you are the informational contents of your mind. That's who you are. You're not your body, your soul, or anything like that. It's information.
It's getting late here, so I'm signing off. But it's been a really great discussion. I've really enjoyed it. And
see you next time.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Thanks a lot,
Bye.
Elizabeth. Bye.
Bye.
Does anybody else have any? Munzer, you have your hand up again?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Wendell, are you there, Wendell?
Yes.
Yeah, you were mentioning. It sounds like you enjoy by learning new scientific theory, right? That's what you are saying. That gives you motivation to live and learn more, find out, discover things, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So that's true, of course, as long as one's brain is enjoying it, new thing. Of course, he would like to live. But when it gets very boring or something, because what if one brain says, okay, I learned a lot, I know still there's a lot more to learn, but it's the same never-ending cycle. But now I'm getting bored. So the moment his brain is going to think like that, they will say there's no point to live anymore. But yes, it is also true. As long as you're enjoying by learning new things, yes, I enjoy too a lot. But the question is that, am I going to continue to enjoy from 10 years from now, 20 years from now? And when I was a lot younger, did I enjoy a lot more? When Archimedes 500 BC, he discovered how to measure the density of gold. He was in the bathtub. He got so excited, so enjoyed so much, he ran outside naked. He said, Eureka, Eureka, I found it, I found it. He discovered. So that's a joy, euphoria. If you have that, yes, then of course you would like to live. Um, uh, and other point thing, information we are talking about, I think that's pretty rational thing. We care, actually we care in the bottommost layer is our ideas in our brain, something else. So Ray Kurzweil, as you were saying, in the future maybe we will be able to transfer all of our ideas in some computer system or AI system or something like that. Yeah, that's what is matter. Even the body, what we feel in our body, just we were talking about the sex and other thing, even that enjoyment can be injected in the brain. When it hurts in my knee, when I hurt something, hit something, hurt, that pain can be injected in your brain by the signal and the qualia part. So at the end of the day, that's what it is. It's information processing. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Munzer. Uh, yeah. Are there any more comments from other people or reactions to anything?
Well, if I could just, you know, continue, yes, that is the thing, because I learned about the dopamine effect. Um, because of course you wonder why people are addicted, and then it's, oh, that's what it is, they're chasing that high again. So once, I mean, there's so much knowledge that we as humans still haven't, so to speak, uncovered, if you will, that you're like, ooh, when I was 20 I didn't know. When I was, man, I'm, yeah. And the amount of knowledge that you've um, acquired and forgotten, and you're like, whoa, then you could always go back and be like, hey, I need a refresher on this and see what the new thing is, because of course they're like social constructs. Then you're like, oh, so we don't need to do that, because that was a social construct, and that was what was taught to humans at a certain period of time. But then, like I said, the scientific thing is like, ooh, we got this whatever thing out in space, that we invented this thing that we could peer further into, the universe, or deeper into the ocean and discover, like I said, that knowledge. Once those people do that, not you personally, once they go, oh yeah, we went to this depth and we found this creature and this is how it behaves and this is how it procreates, and you're like, oh, fascinating. And there'll always be that. It won't be like, okay, that's it, close up shop, we learned everything there is to learn, right?
Yeah. Thanks, Wendell. Yeah, I see. Let's see. One more thing I wanted to mention. Yeah, there is. I think it's related to what both of you were saying. There is one of the comments from the defenders of the idea of enjoying immortality is John Martin Fisher, one of the philosophers who is in the resources. Is an interview with him, and he defends the idea. He thinks of it. He uses the analogy of assuming, like, let's say you love knowledge and you love to read books, and suppose you had an infinite supply of books to read and all the time in the world, and you enjoyed just absorbing more and more information, and it would take you forever, and new books were being produced all the time, so it's not like there was a finite number of books. Would you enjoy, if you had all this available to you, something that you find deep enjoyment and an unlimited supply of it? Why wouldn't you want to live forever? That's his argument. So this is um, and well, but even he though, and when he's pressed on this, he does say, well, he's not in favor of immortality, of forced immortality. He is in favor of what he called, and I mentioned this earlier, of life extension, which means this. It means as long as there's stuff that's engaging you and fulfilling you and you're enjoying it, you want to live that long. And maybe that's forever, but maybe it's not forever. Maybe there comes a point when even the library or reading these books is just not enough is enough. Can you predict that you will never run into a situation where you have had enough? Wouldn't you want to like have the option of living forever if you want to, but you could at any time say give up on it and say, okay, a million years of reading books is enough. I don't need another million years. And I guess I've learned a billion number of things, but enough is enough. If you What he wanted to do is preserve the possibility, again, because this is so unknown to normal human beings, this infinite supply of something, infinite supply of enjoyable things is so unhuman and unexperienced by normal humans. He wanted to leave a little out, so to speak, a little clause that said, well, just in case I decide I don't want any more, I don't want to be forced into immortality, is what he was trying to say. Okay? Because forced immortality is like closing all your doors. You have no way out. And he found that a little scary. Um, Again, this assumes that, and it's reasonable to assume that every experience we've ever had has been finite. We don't have human experiences that are infinite. So even with our finite experience, sometimes we do get bored, but we can usually find something else to keep us going. But
So why we have to keep us going? Why we have to keep us going?
why?
No,
No,
I'm just probing.
all he's saying is that there's nothing illogical or crazy or irrational about wanting to keep going as long as you're engaged in whatever it is. But he allows the possibility that that might end, but he doesn't know. But he just doesn't want to be put in a situation where you cannot stop being immortal. You must live forever. That it would be scary. I don't know if you have a reaction to that.
Yeah. Can I say something? Yeah. You know, when I was a lot younger, and even in young folks, let's say teenager or early 20s, when they try to set up an app on their iPhone or something, it takes 10, 15 minutes if it's more complicated. You go there, press this, press that, you configure this. And when they first time did it and it worked, they will jump off their chair and say, wow, I figured it out, I figured it out. They will start dancing, yeah, fun. Now today, I'm an older person. I'm sick and tired of setting up the app. I don't enjoy it. I don't want to deal with this thing. It's a pain in the neck. Every app I have to configure and set it up. It's not even interesting. Let it happen automatically. Same way, what Wendell is saying, that enjoyment of learning, yeah, I agree with that. I also enjoy with learning. But if you think from that angle, okay, so what? If I figured it out that what happened on the surface of the black hole, which as of today we do not know. Okay, so what big deal about it? Yeah, there's so many things, zillions of things still is going to remain unknown, unexplainable. So from that angle, it's too much work. I would like to hear someone else's opinion on that.
Munzer, you're saying that you can easily conceive becoming tired after a certain point with acquisition of endless supply of knowledge, right?
Yeah. Is that what's the point of learning all of this?
Yeah.
This thing? What's the point? Where I'm going? It's never ending.
Yeah. That was what was happening to the Elena Makropoulos in the play. She was, I mean, she was like anybody else. She was probably enjoying the first parts of her life, and maybe did for a long time. The fact, although one of the things, the side effects, of course, this might have been just because of her situation and not universal. And this is why some people mention there's a difference between being immortal yourself and being part of a whole community of people who are immortal. In her case, she was alone. And there
that will be worse. Yeah, that will be worse.
Because now she had to experience the life and death and of her own of her grandchildren several times over, again and again and again. People she got attached to, she got to watch them die again and again. Now, so that's a different situation than, say, being around everybody you know and care about is along with you, because in theory, you don't have to experience that the suffering of other people, witnessing it over and over again. But even that, it seems like, might take longer to get bored with everybody in a situation where everybody's immortal, but it still seems like the species would become bored, at some point. In fact,
well, I mean, I understand boredom. I experience it. But in general, I don't give much credence to it. I can't regulate my life based on my boredom. I have to function in different ways. And I'm not sure what the question that Munzer was presenting is that, but it's like, I think imaginatively, so similar to immortality is past lives, reincarnation, and going back and knowing that you're living a past life or that you're living a future life. And imagine the adventure of that. I mean, there's so much chaos in life anyway that human beings don't want to accept. I mean, the biological rhythms of life are not what human beings are taught to accept, right? It's like we're rejecting the idea that we die. But I can imagine, enjoying that very much, despite having to learn to have a philosophical basis for understanding the cycles that I was involved in. And with the questions as being it posed, I feel like while they're interesting, and I think certainly this has been thought-provoking, it does not allow me to live imaginatively, to live in a world that has been created by this author. It's like if I have those options, I'm going to live much more imaginatively than just finding the paradigm of immortality to be set in existential crisis all the time, and that kind of thing. So anyway,
I agree.
thank you.
I agree. The positive and yeah, and okay, like the acquisition of knowledge or the eradication of ignorance, that is not like a destructive behavior, let's say like crack or religion or alcohol. You're not going to be like, oh man, I got to drive fast so I could gain some more knowledge and, take out a family that's, on the road. It's like you go at your leisure, you're like, hey, let me learn some stuff. Right. So it's not destructive to anyone, including yourself. You're not going to be like, oh man, that's all I'm doing. I'm not taking showers. Right. So from that perspective, that author just paints that because that's what they wanted to present to their audience at that time.
Okay.
Thanks, Victor.
Okay.
I'm so glad I got to come. I haven't been in such a long time. It was really fun.
Yeah, thanks, Mary, for coming, and everybody else as well. Yeah, I guess that's it, unless anybody has any final comments. I guess that'll be it. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Yeah, thanks for having me again too. You guys are wonderful.
All right.